Welcome to Buying Sandlot, and I'm Kyle Pagan along with Kyle Scott. And today we have another Buying Sandlot contributor, James Kratch, with us today. And we just want to thank James for showing up in his vest properly and coming to the live stream or coming to the episode in a proper dressed down version of James Kratch. I like that. Did you see the clip?
Did see the clip. That's why I wore my Patagonia. I have this in purple. I've got a couple of Vineyard Vines vests. I got
Wow.
everything.
Wow.
Now, this is what happens when you are a sports writer for a decade and you want to break the Oscar Madison trend of being a schlub. And also, like, the pockets are super helpful when you're covering like college football and you got to sprint down to the field. You got to put your recorder in there, your phone, your notepad, etc. So I became a vest guy on game day.
I don't know if the Patagonia is the poor man's Peter Millar, if the Peter Millar is the poor man's Patagonia. I honestly don't know the answer.
I would say Patagonia is probably the poor man's Peter Millar.
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah,
It's expensive.
I also think like Peter Millar is more of like a you're scenic. You're going to the ocean. You're playing golf vest. This is sort of a working man's vest. All season vest. So that's why we landed on this.
I'm telling you, the PE guys still use the Peter Millar as their daily for doing the lawn and stuff. Well, I should say watching somebody else do the lawn.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just going to start wearing it over my T-shirt just to go full. Yeah.
That's a good look. I've seen it. Did that in a spring game once. I had one of those like more like softer, lighter, like Eddie Bauer vest over the polo shirt,
I think I'm going for more of a casual look, a casual sweatshirt. I'm going to just kind of bring in my different sports collection that I have sitting behind me in my drawer behind me until I do invest a little bit. And my birthday's coming around, so if you guys are looking for any ideas for me and stuff, maybe a Peter Millar made a Patagonia, maybe something on the low end. I'm not. I don't care.
Your look, I would define is a plebe chic today.
Yeah, you're the social guy though. The
Parking
social
lot
guy is
plebe.
Supposed to be a little rough and tumble, a little dressed down.
Yeah, you got to be authentic.
100%. Yeah, maybe I'll just totally diverge and I'll just go golf shirt. I'll be the golf shirt guy on the pod.
Got to get you some golf shirts.
I like that.
Well, let's get into it. We have a jam-packed episode today focusing on our youth sports predictions for the year 2026. That's right. We're doing sports predictions almost 3 weeks into the new year. We wanted to be the last media organization to do predictions in the new year 2026. But before we get into that, tickets for our youth sports business conference in Philadelphia on April 14th and 15th are still available. Time to get yours today, as well as some limited VIP attendee tickets. We just announced Matt Mueller, COO of Huddle, in the newsletter, as well as an unbelievable speaker list you don't want to miss, from execs at Game Changer and Team Snap to Positive Coaching Alliance and more at Ballers. Ticket prices, though, do increase January 31st, so get yours now. All right, let's get into the predictions of 2026. Kyle, I'm going to throw it to you first. International expansion. This is an easy one. We've seen it with Perfect Games' plans to expand more in the Pacific Rim. Fanatics has flag football, though it's not youth sports, but it will be playing in Saudi Arabia in March, featuring Tom Brady and Saquon. And then you have international companies looking to America for investment in youth sports and vice versa. How do you see this being achieved, international expansion by companies?
Yeah, depending on how you look at it, over the last 10 years, participation is either flat or down. I think generally down across the country, which means but people are spending 50% more than they were just a few years ago. So some of that's inflation, but a lot of that is just more products, more services, more travel. There's only so far you can grow doing it that way. The two other ways that the industry really ratchets up is we have a goal of 63% participation among kids in America, I think between now and 2032. So that's one way. You grow from about mid-50s participation to low 60s. And then the other is like, well, you got to find more kids, right? Where are there more kids? Well, there's kids all over the world. And I think you talked about it with Perfect Game. Dick's bought Foot Locker, and they really cited its international footprint as being a major reason why. I wouldn't be surprised to, see them sort of leverage Game Changer and that Foot Locker footprint to go international with Game Changer. And then I've talked to more than one exec at notable companies in the space that are like, hey, this is the next logical step for us. In lots of ways, youth sports development is more advanced in parts of the world. We've talked about this with the NBA in Europe and the Balkans. Like, they have more structure because countries are just geographically smaller. They have one governing body. They all sort of, work on the same roadmap, so to speak. But in terms of like the tech, the equipment, the training, the tools, I think America is far ahead there, and there's lots of opportunity in Europe and Asia as well. So I think that will be a trend as we look to say, hey, how do we grow this pie? And I've had investors from Lisbon and the Middle East, and I think one from even Africa, like in my DMs asking, hey, we're consuming the newsletter. How can we get involved? Trying to pick my brain about some such. So there's lots of like international signs on the radar.
If you had to pick one, do you think it's going to be, or not pick one, but if you think it's mostly going to be through consumer products, more tournaments, company consolidation, do you think the facility space will look into more expanding into these new countries?
I would probably say tech because it's easiest. It's software. It's easier to sort of move software across the pond. Facilities come with all sorts of zoning stuff. I think any and all can go international. Certainly events feels if there's so much sports tourism, right? Hey, why go to Indiana if you can go play a soccer tournament in Italy, right? I don't know. That feels like a couple of years off before that becomes like a mainstream thing. But tech seems like the obvious one.
Speaking of tech platforms, I want to throw it over to James right here. James predicts that an elite high school football platform launches. Explain that one for us, James.
Yes, so obviously this past December we saw Overtime, Omaha Productions, Peyton Manning's production house, ESPN put on the Overtime. I think it was the Overtime High School Football Nationals. I forget, it was a very long name. Got to cut that down a little bit. But the whole concept was it was promoted as a official national championship game. St. Francis, which won, they were like a legit national high school national title contender. Corner Canyon from Utah really wasn't, but the second part of this prediction is, so one, they've made it clear they want to keep doing this, that they hope to expand it. So I think this year the natural next step is like a 14 bracket or a 16 bracket. It's like a +1 or a plus two situation. But I think the bigger thing here is they had hoped to have IMG Academy and St. Francis play in this game. Those schools were scheduled, I think, to play a regular season game in early November. Overtime, ESPN, Omaha come, hey, we want to move this game 6 weeks out and put it on a Wednesday night after college football's over, kind of a dead period, make this a big deal. St. Francis said, sure, okay. MG was like, no, we're not really looking to do this because we got kids who are looking to go to college, it's a 6-week layoff, et cetera, et cetera. But you can't have high school sports be a valuable media property if the two best teams in the country can have a game on the books and then it just blows up overnight. So I think that part of this league would be like tying those types of schools into playing each other. So maybe it's a situation where there's only 4 teams in the league and they all play a round robin in the regular season. And then they add a couple of public schools that can sort of shake free of their state governing bodies and play an extra game at the end of the year or two.
Gotcha.
It sounds more like the European Soccer Cup model, which I like.
Yes.
By the way.
Yeah, I think it has to be that way because, again, like there's only a finite amount of schools that are like IMG, St. Francis, that don't really compete for their state championship. So it's not 10 of these schools walking around. I mean, we all did the whole, Bishop thing, Bishop Sycamore thing. That sort of thing happens. And I do think that is probably something that weighs on some viewers' minds that, hey, is this a real high school or is this some BS concoction? I think it's interesting. We've written this in the past that if you look at the ESPN high school football ratings, when it's 2 big-time public schools in like Georgia or Florida, those tend to rate better than the kind of national independent prep schools. So I think that is also something to take into effect. Is there going to be more of a push to, if you're just a casual viewer on a Friday night on ESPN2, are you more inclined to watch a Texas high school football playoff game where you have no idea, you don't really know anything about these two teams, but it's Texas high school football and it's a big deal?
100%. I went down to Eagles versus Cowboys about 2 years ago, and I was like, I have to go see Texas high school football. Didn't matter who it was. It was just somebody who closest I could get to. Do you think, James, the high school playoff committee will be as much under a microscope as the college football playoff committee when it comes down to this?
My guess is no, because my guess is the first question each committee would have to ask is, can you actually come participate in this thing? I would think that is the big threshold. This game and it was competitive for a little while, but like Corner Canyon was there because they were able to be there. I don't think it was because they were number 2 team in the country. So I think as this grows over time, we'll try to get closer to that. It's never going to be perfect. This high school football has 97 different media rankings, and it's how you compare these teams. It's apples and oranges in a lot of cases, but I do think they'll try to streamline the effect and kind of make a nice media package that can be on ESPN on a Friday.
Moving on to accessibility and affordability. I mean, you see it in the news cycle all 2025. It was all about increasing the cost of participation in youth sports. How do you think this will happen in 2026, Kyle?
Yeah, this is one of those topics where I feel like I get over my skis, right? That is like just a notch above my mental pay grade, the way the sausage is made in society. But I wrote maybe midway through the year, I think when the New York Times wrote their article about the cost of sports, I said, hey, like this is going to be the article. I know we could all talk about how newspapers aren't relevant anymore. Nobody cares about the New York Times, which in many ways is true. But when something gets the treatment by a New York Times, by 60 Minutes, they kind of tend to be like these tipping point moments in an industry where it injects it more into the public conscience. And my guess is if you search youth sports, that New York Times article comes up pretty high, organically. I say that because at the time I wrote, hey, over the next 2 to 3 years, the media is going to have all sorts of derivative reports that sort of go back and cite this and really shine a not so positive light on the cost of youth sports. Maybe I was a bit naive because that happened way faster than I think I even thought it would. It took like 2 to 3 months, not 2 to 3 years. And we saw it in, name every major publication. And then I would say it all hit ahead with the Black Bear story, written by a very far left a socialist publication, quite literally, about how they were requiring parents to not allowing parents to film their kids at all, even take pictures, which wasn't true. It had to do with like setting up a live stream setup and live streaming the entire game. Black Bear wanted to use their thing. I think that hit ahead, and now it's entered sort of the public debate. So I think 2026 becomes the year where governments, state governments, the federal government, governing bodies and leagues, and even the bigger companies through donations and philanthropy really think meaningfully about addressing accessibility and affordability in youth sports. But I don't think that's a bad thing for the industry. I think it's a good thing. We talked about this the other day, so I don't need to go through it all the way again. But for anyone who didn't listen, if you have the government offering tax rebates or grants for participation for kids and families that can't afford it, well, that money is still going to go into the pockets of the for-profit companies. So this isn't, while the headlines may be negative and sting a little for the businesses and the private equity that are in the space, ultimately, if you're subsidizing the cost, that's good for business. And I think the best example of this, maybe taken to an extreme, is college, right? Government backs student loans. Colleges can charge whatever they want. They can pace inflation by 2 to 3 times, but people still pay it, and banks still offer the loans because the government's there to bail them out. So I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I think the same dynamic could be at play here. We've seen some bills about $2,000 rebate here, $200 here, $3,000 there. I think there gets to be some coordination, and I think the industry is happily involved because that money eventually gets passed back.
And we talked about it. If you want some easy brownie points and you're in politics on either side of the aisle, you introduce some legislation. I think we've talked about it in the newsletter 3 different times about the PA state senator that just did it, as well as the New Jersey congressman, I think, did it a couple of years ago with the Play Act. It's an easy one.
That's saying it's a win-win for everybody. It's a bipartisan. Everyone agrees. So that the reason I mentioned the Black Bear story, because it was written by a socialist publication, and then Fox News gave it the exact same treatment. How often do you see a far left and Fox agreeing on the angle of a story? Total bipartisan issue. Everyone agrees. Too expensive. Even people that have the money are like, this is crazy. I don't think this makes sense. But they're willing to do it. Some people can't. That's where government, philanthropy, donations, all that can come in. And ultimately, I think that money still winds up in the hands of the tech companies and the events and the facilities and all that.
This next trend I absolutely love, and I hope it does take off. Organized pickup competition becomes a hot trend. Now, I already see this on TikTok and YouTube. I don't know. I mean, James, you're a New York guy, or North New Jersey at least, so I don't know if you know George the Messiah, who goes to one-on-one in basketball parks in New York. He challenges people. And then you got people like the Professor from the old M1 mixtape tour. He'll go down to Venice Beach and he'll just cook a bunch of nobodies and stuff. But I liked how you talked about this trend and you kind of based it around the nostalgia factor of everything?
Yeah. So, I mean, I thought, okay, so the kids who are playing youth sports today, their parents were born in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. And I think that everyone talks about, why can't youth sports be like it used to be X or Y or Z? And I just think that it can be, but it's not going to, we're never going to get to free range kids like going and playing baseball, like the Sandlot, like the movie, like that. We're not going to get there. We could take today's kind of modern sensibilities and management and organization and apply it to that spirit. So, we've written a good deal about like I9 Sports, and they've got the very kind of simple platform is that you show up on Saturday, you practice for an hour, you play for an hour, you go home. So I thought, okay, how do you kind of break that down even more to kind of capture that sort of like it's just a game, it's just for fun feeling? So I could see, for instance, a baseball league where they don't have set teams, but they create a schedule and 18 kids get told to show up to this field at 10 a.m. on Saturday, and the parents can come, but they don't coach, and the umpire lines the kids up 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, picks two baseball teams, they play baseball. And then they're there to make sure the kids are safe. If the game is 12-0 after an inning, you stop, you switch up the sides, you start again. Or you have an open gym where, yes, it could be a full 5-on-5 basketball game, but the kids could also just play knockout for 2 hours. I think that is the whole idea. I don't think we're ever going to get to that sort of like free range, kids just go play sports until mom tells them to come home for dinner. But we could sort of create that environment in a way that is got all the safety and the organization and the management.
100%. And the technology's there, through Game Changer, through YouTube, through TikTok Live. Like I see these guys up in upstate Pennsylvania. They just converted this field and they play wiffle ball on it, and it's a legit like 150-foot field. But it's amazing, and it's gotten viral traction over it. That would be cool with this technology. You got something to say, Kyle?
Yeah, I love this one. So a couple things. One, it picks up on this macro trend in parenting. I don't know if you guys read it. There was this book a couple of years ago called The Anxious Generation, like a top 5 bestseller for the last few years. And it's all about how phones are, killing everybody's brains, especially kids. One of the findings was that we now sort of overprotect kids in the physical world, but underprotect them in the digital world, right? Because gone are the days kids used to be able to go out and play wiffle ball, go down the street, go around the block. And like that doesn't happen as much anymore. But we've given them free reign online. One of the takeaways of the book was unstructured playtime is so important for childhood development. And one of the best forms of unstructured playtime is the pickup wiffle ball game, the pickup basketball game, because you have to figure out rules. You have to deal with conflict. People don't agree. We all remember, somebody storming inside because someone called them out, or a ball or strike, or, they were tagged, they were not tagged, all that stuff. So this picks up on this trend in parenting. 2, this is happening. So I'm going to reference a couple of folks here. You got the Pickup Club, pickup-club.com. I actually spoke to this guy a few months ago, Drew Braver, out of somewhere in North Jersey, probably not far from you, James. And there's another one I saw, I don't know this one quite as well, Pickup Portal, all one word.com, that basically look to both be doing versions of this. Pickup Portal says it has 765 teams, over 3,000 players. I know from speaking to Drew with the Pickup Club that he was sort of piloting this in North Jersey, New York metro area. Overwhelming demand from parents. And I think it was just like through Facebook groups and word of mouth, and parents were coming out of the woodwork. And you show up, they pay a teenager to sort of ref and facilitate, but they don't do anything unless it gets out of hand. They just provide the basic structure. They're there to supervise, make sure nobody gets hurt. So it's like safe pickup, perfect for parents these days. And I know he was having a lot of momentum. A lot of these feel like sort of grassroots efforts. I haven't seen anything huge where there's a lot of structure around this, but this certainly feels like a huge trend. So I think it's a really good one, James.
Could have used that company in the Hershey Brawl on the Mites on Ice. We could have used those guys on the ice there.
One of those guys could have been in the mascot costume. It's like undercover referee. You're just a mascot.
I think that this also concept in terms of, we've written a lot about these spaces that have dead time and how they kind of capitalize on that, monetize that, kind of scale it. This is the perfect sort of thing for your high school baseball field that sits vacant during the summer, because this like in New Jersey, like the coaches really couldn't work with the kids, and they weren't selling the field out to travel games, so they just sat there, that sort of thing. And I think it also has the potential to go beyond youth sports. Kyle knows this. When I got married, my big idea for my bachelor party was I just want to take batting practice on like a nice field. You know, most guys graduate from high school, they never take BP again. It was impossible.
You left out
It was
the part
like
about strippers on the poles, on the foul pole.
that too. But it was like if you want to go, like you can't just show up to a town league, like a town field. You can't. They've got 97,000 pieces of red tape to cut through. Local minor league club, you call them and they're basically like, well, I'm close to the Somerset Patriots, which is an independent league team now is the Yankees AA affiliate. And the basic lesson was like the Yankees would shoot you if you tried to step on their field. And, and then colleges or rented out to tournaments and such in the summer. So it's really hard to find these spaces, but these spaces are just sitting there. And a kind of pickup league could kind of grab that and, facility owners, complex owners could make a little bit of extra money off time.
I would take it even smaller. I think you could even get small-sided sports, young kids, 8, 9-year-olds. You don't even need a full baseball field. Just give me a patch of like reasonably seeded grass, and it's probably good enough.
Give me a TrackMan at Victus Sports. You ever been to the TrackMan at Victus Sports? You just get it's like a golf simulator. It's amazing.
That was your exit velo.
It's amazing product when it doesn't lie to me about my 87 exit velo.
That's really good.
But then it's probably lower than that. I'll tell you what,
I topped out at 79 on one a couple of weeks ago, actually, at an EL1.
I made them goose the system a little bit and make it more available for me to get it out of Citizens Bank Park. I got warning track power still.
I think one of our best content ideas here is you trying out a lot of this tech, and
I hope to at the convention tomorrow.
Also, head to head, who's more accurate, right? See how much variance there is in some of these.
True. Moving along to number 5 here was the pushback on specialization. I don't think this will be, well, maybe it'll be a surprise to some people, but plenty of studies have come out over the last couple of years that specialization isn't correlated to your kid becoming the next Aaron Judge or the next LeBron James. And I did just see a clip of Kirk Herbstreit talking to Greg Olson about the Earl Woods syndrome, where a generation of parents saw Tiger Woods become the greatest golfer of all time because he was on Letterman on 2 years old, or his dad, made him hit 500 golf balls a day since he was in diapers. That doesn't seem like it's going to be the case with a lot of parents going forward to the next generation. You think so, Kyle?
My favorite line I wrote last year, my favorite one-liner, for every one Tiger Woods, there's 100,000 miserable kids and one Tiger Woods. It's a terrible life at that level. It looks glamorous, but it's a lot of time, I think, inside one's own head. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously, I think people in the industry understand this, but the study that came out at the end of the year that we featured, I think it was our last end of the year, where they looked across disciplines, not just sports, but chess and music and things like that. And it's clear that the elite of the elite at the pro level were, they may have been really good as kids, but they were not like the top 10 nationally ranked as kids. Like there's almost no overlap between those two groups. You've had LeBron James and Bryce Harper, both, two of the most heralded, sort of team sport athletes ever, as teenagers, both say, hey, play multiple sports, don't specialize, whole host of reasons. If for nothing else, just for your athleticism. I think this will take root with parents to some extent in 2026, and how the industry benefits here is, James, you write about this almost every week at this point. It seems like there's consolidation happening. PE is coming in, giving money to clubs that are well run, well organized, have a good ethos, good back end. And part of that money will go to expanding not only geographically, but across sport. We're seeing with New York Empire Baseball, True Lacrosse, the baseball, what's the capacity sports group. I think the clubs that are able to offer more than one sport throughout the year will really win here, because parents, they may be really happy with their soccer club, but if they're like, maybe little Johnny doesn't need 3 soccer seasons throughout the year, maybe he only needs 2, and in the spring he plays some baseball or something like that. If you could stay under the same umbrella, it's just easier for everybody. So if you're able to offer year-round programming, and Kyle, you and I talked about it, eventually it looks like the local rec league or schools, right? These are both things local rec leagues and schools do, but clubs can still bring that private element, structure, better coaching, a lot of times safety, better fields, facilities, experience, things like that. So I think clubs emulating this sort of classic township rec league, but at a higher level, is probably where you win.
Yeah, it'll make that payment, I would say, for some families. It would make it easier to hand over if I knew that I was getting some mega complex that I could not get anywhere else. And that's also helping my property value if I do it.
Right, right. And but it's all under one flag, right? So you play
Yeah.
soccer and baseball under the same flag. You don't have to play for FC Delco here and the Philly Bandits there. Like it's one flag.
I was just going to add, I'd be curious though of specialization numbers. How much of it is like, hey, I'm a single mom and my kid has a great soccer club and it's a safe place 4 nights a week because they got 2 games or 2 practices. And then if that is Kyle's point, if that club suddenly has baseball, it might just be, it's not that, oh, we think we're going to be messy. This is really good for our family, but now there's 2 things that are really good for our family. I'd be curious to see how much of specialization is just convenience or the kids just love the sport. I was obsessed with baseball when I was a kid. If they'd let me play baseball 7 days a week, I probably would have done it.
I just had the same conversation with my son. He wants to play, play spring and fall. He wants to do summer. I'm like, hey, you like going to the beach and playing pickup wiffle ball. And for all the reasons we just talked about, I was like, you love that. That's good for you. We probably don't need a third baseball season in the year. And for the kids who love the sport, it's hard, but I think they wind up picking up new skills and meeting, if nothing else, meeting new friends. So big trend to 26 and onward. The push against specialization. You're always going to have parents who want to create the next Tiger Woods, and there will be examples, but I think it will increasingly become the exception. Parents I talk to seem keenly aware of this already.
Yeah. James, you can take this one. The Supreme Court will agree to hear a Title IX based challenge to the House settlement. What did you think on this one?
I'll go even deeper. I am of the opinion that whenever this does happen, 5-4 decision, a couple of conservative judges will swing over. They're going to rule, I think, the House settlement violates Title IX. And I've talked because what it comes down to this: you cannot have public schools that receive federal funding that are very cognizant of having, the proportions and the ratios of women's sports, men's sports, suddenly say we're giving 20 something million dollars a year to our athletes, and we're basically going to give 98% of it to football players and men's basketball players. I just don't see how that matches the federal law. So I think 2 things happen if this case gets heard and then they decide in favor of the plaintiffs. One, all of a sudden, D1 female athletes are looking at $10 million a year. That's a massive windfall for volleyball players, for soccer players, for lacrosse players. 2, at the youth level, all of a sudden there's millions of dollars at stake, and you're going to see another surge of, girls sports. I mean, we see it anecdotally that like girls basketball participation is declining in a lot of areas. Well, what happens when all of a sudden women's basketball makes the most revenue share of their half because that's on TV and everything? That sport's going to explode again in popularity. So I just think at the end of the day, the conferences kind of rushed into this thing without thinking what was going to happen. And I think we're looking at another wave of chaos because I just don't see how you can have a protected class be so disadvantaged in terms of compensation when everything else is designed to protect that class.
Is there a world college becomes pointless for sports? Like you have your arms around this better. I know I'm thinking like long-term down the road, but like there's so many things at odds now because men's football and basketball does generate most of the revenue. So you're putting a sort of private capitalistic structure under a structure that was designed to be even and fair across sports, across gender. And like, eventually it just feels like the economics of that don't work.
They don't. So I say no for 2 reasons. One, I think at some point we will just wake up and acknowledge that football and men's basketball should be separate entities that do their own thing. I think the more important, fascinating question is, quote a guy I talked to, our Olympics are going to really suck if we don't figure this out because all of these sports, swimming, diving, volleyball, soccer, they get cut because they want to pay the football team. Well, where's our feeder system? Where, a lot of our, governing bodies are not necessarily nimble enough to adapt to this. So I think we're going to get to a point where football and men's basketball are kind of their own thing, and everything else is subsidized by a lot of different sources. Like I've always said, to me, it would make sense for TKO, so UFC and WWE, subsidize every men's and women's Division One wrestling program in the country, because a lot of these guys and gals are going to the Olympics, which is great, but they're also going to become MMA, joining WWE. It's just a natural fit for them. It's like, sort of like what the NFL and the NBA get with college football and basketball. It's a cheap, effective feeder system. I think we could get to a point where MLB says, you know what, we're going to subsidize for the Big Ten, the SEC, a couple other major conferences to use wooden bats, especially as they're cutting back on the minor leagues. Now they're creating their own minor league. I think the Pentagon might even say it's important to us. We need to subsidize elite swimming and diving because we want to win gold medals, but it also kind of fits that thing. So I think that's what we will get to is a lot of subsidization. All these schools need to realize.
Kyle's laughing, but like lots of governments do subsidize their sports. I mean, this is pretty.
But think about it, like. What is something every 2 years? It just checks all these boxes, like a national pride thing, of a patriotism thing. It's marketing for the Pentagon. I mean,
dude, they're recruiting for like the top number one pick for Delta Force, right? He's got to be able to swim across. He's got to be able to swim in the Caracas and
maybe there is some sort of maybe the kids who are part of this is sort of like ROTC and there is some service on the back end. But I just think that I just can't envision a world where all of a sudden it's like, oh, these things don't exist anymore, but we're still going to go win as many gold medals.
Yeah.
Especially as we're about to host 2028 and we're going to have Salt Lake City for the Winter Olympics a couple of years after that. I just think at some point there is going to be subsidization that's going to allow football and men's basketball to kind of go do their own thing. And I'll be honest, I am fascinated to see when that happens, because when we talk about private equity and everything, it becomes a business. And you know what? Businesses don't like to pay 3 head coaches to work for you to not work for you. I don't know if a business is going to say, is a PE firm going to at Utah going to be like, hey, you can pay an offensive coordinator $2 million and then pay another one $1 million and not work for you because you fired him. Like, I don't know if that's going to fly. So I think those sports are also looking at kind of a rude awakening.
Only for LSU.
Exactly. LSU will pay. I mean, yeah.
No, I would imagine. I was going to say I would imagine 70% of the special forces that went in and got Maduro swam at Michigan.
70%. I did read in a James newsletter about a week ago that biathlon is getting some new looks, right? So we're trying to find our next marksman already.
Well, that's the thing. So biathlon is big in Europe, but like the kind of the small but passionate biathlon community in the U.S. like they just bring the rifles to like youth skiing competitions, and they got a line all the way up the mountain of kids who want to shoot the gun, and they get hooked to it. So.
Keep the weapons arms dealers local and domestic.
Yes.
Last thing on this one is segmenting football and basketball in college. I know we're not in the weeds as much, but we see it. I know there's some things going on where some of the colleges are talking about athletic departments they have or they're going to spin out sort of this for-profit arm that's backed by private equity. Is there a world where college football, as an example, just sits alongside the college as a for-profit venture, and the college licenses its name and rents its facilities to its partner program, but it's all a private venture? There's probably a host of reasons why that can't work, but to me, it almost feels like if you're going to segment them out, it would have to be some like reverse licensing model.
People talk about that. I don't think that'll ever happen, just because too many invested stakeholders would sort of lose. Like Kyle made the joke about LSU. If LSU is spun out to a licensed, for-profit entity when they license LSU, is the governor of Louisiana going to get to run around and try to run the show? No. Is the booster who put his name on the weight room going to get to, fly on the team plane and go to practice? Probably not. I've always said, you go to a big-time college football facility, it's a palatial, it's got everything. You go to an NFL facility, it looks like an office park. Why do you think that is? Because NFL owners don't care. They're not going to spend their money to put a waterfall in the lobby. They don't care. But in college, it's the guy who puts his name on the door that put the waterfall in. So I don't think it would happen just because all of those hangers on in the schools, they would lose too much control and prestige. So I just can't see that happening.
So no RCX for the NCAA.
I don't think that's gonna happen. It could, but then again, I also think that at some point these conferences will wake up and be like, hey, like no one's really in charge and we're kind of our own independent entity. So maybe the SEC does do that, but the Big Ten is like, no, we don't feel comfortable doing it.
Makes sense.
Maybe the boosters will start sponsoring the bars at the Topgolf or something like that, because we're moving over to Sportstainment as Kyle thinks that it will grow. Callaway did just take a huge loss on Topgolf, so I'm just interested with why you think it's possible Sportstainment grows in 2026.
Yeah, and maybe I need a better sort of one-liner to describe this. As with most things, I struggle to keep it succinct. But yeah, Topgolf struggled, right? But it's not because it was a terrible concept. It's because like they're huge, right? It's a massive real estate build out. You need a huge footprint. I forget the number of square feet or acres or whatever. It's huge. And it's partially a restaurant. It's never that full. I mean, there's lots of reasons why Topgolf itself is struggling. But the Topgolf of X, where X is something that doesn't take up as much square footage, namely, right? Or that you can have an asset light business where you license out, rent or license or sell these sort of, I'll use Batbox as the example. We've talked about them. It's a company out of, I think, Texas and Mexico, where they're selling about their like 40-foot long cages and they're batting cage simulators, much like we talked about with TrackMan and things like that. But it looks like it's interactive. There's a screen. It looks like the ball's coming out of the screen. It's gamified. You can play different games, and the difficulty, goes from super easy to super hard. That is something that while they're opening some of their own restaurants and facilities, they're also licensing the tech to existing batting cages. And they're saying, hey, if you got 5 tunnels, why don't you buy one of these systems? It's tens of thousands of dollars, not million, to license, not millions, to license it or buy it or rent it for their exact pricing. And it's like you could bring people in and they'll get a better experience. So I would classify my sportstainment trend as not just like the Topgolf of X opening, but also other unique ways to monetize under-monetized space in existing facilities. So much of I think we should call the youth sports facilities arms race. We may want to put in parentheses weekend tournament, before the facility part, because that's where all the money has gone, and $30 million, $50 million here, up to $200 million in some places. I don't think we've topped out on that, but I continue to believe that at some point, eventually you build enough of these where you can't fill all of them every weekend, every weeknight. I think the focus should shift to the places where kids and families spend the other 5 days of the week, which is their local practice facility, which usually isn't as nice, right? And I know the economics are a lot different. You don't have people traveling there, but there's lots of ways to unlock more revenue, more opportunity, and frankly, more fun. There's the Foot Lab with soccer. I know they're opening a location in LA. I know we've talked about Shoot 360, which is a little bit of, James, you could probably touch on Shoot 360 in a sec. You know more about them. But I think you're just going to see these systems that can come into existing spaces and unlock more revenue. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the big facility folks in the space began to think about, sort of sportstainment and that gamified tech that goes with it.
So you think instead of being standalone properties, they should maybe bake these into facilities? Kind of like when we had a bowling alley back in the 90s and early aughts, you always had an arcade or you always had a bar come along with it.
That's it, right? Like the modern arcade, rather than Pac-Man, it's a 40-foot batting tunnel where you could go in with your buddies and, and bat off of Randy Johnson, whatever it is, right? That to me I feel like that's a better business model than the real estate building. Even if it's a smaller facility than a Topgolf, it's still scary, right? There's real estate, interest rates, a lot more that goes into it. If you have something to monetize all these huge sort of large warehouse style facilities out there, that might be another way to come at it. The other one I'll cite is Valhalla FC Arena. I interviewed him very early on in Buying Sandlot out in Colorado. He's opening one of these. Now he's opening the full facility. He wants to do a couple. He has a lot of experience in entertainment. I think he used to run a business at the Battery in Atlanta, so he knows what he's doing. He's building a giant beer hall inside this indoor soccer facility, but it's going to have smart pitches where rather than goals, there's smart boards so they can increase the size of the goal depending on, the ages playing. They have these gamified training systems where you're practicing your targets and all that, like very modern stuff. You ever saw Cars 3? Remember when they got in the simulator and the electric car was like running and, Lightning McQueen just wanted to drive on the dirt, right? Like the electric car stuff for youth sports, putting them inside existing facilities. But there will be people who will build their own, and they will be a level of hospitality and food and beverage well above and beyond what you would expect from your typical indoor sports facility. I think he said something like, don't quote me on this, but like a third of the revenue he expects to come from food and beverage, automated drink systems, all that.
You got to remember, I'm not the movie guy, so you're going to have to carry the references. I've never seen Cars.
But you just glossed over when I referenced Cars. That's just amazing to me. It's amazing to me. I know you don't have kids, but Jesus.
James, what are you thinking about Shoot 360?
Yeah, so it's funny. So Shoot 360, actually, a couple of months ago, talked with Craig Moody, the founder, and just basically, he was a long time college and high school basketball coach. He lives the Portland area. It was raining one day. It was a beautiful day. He goes to his kids like, hey, why don't you go shoot hoops? Like, well, we want to play 2K. He's like, okay, I got to find a way actually create basketball that looks like it feels like a video game to them. But he is when he kind of scoffs at the top golf of basketball, comparison people make. He's like, we're never going to do beer and nachos because he just said that's not what we do. So there are Shoot 360 kind of franchise locations in the country, and they're rapidly franchising. But they also have their tech in the new youth basketball complex that the Brooklyn Nets just opened, or they've got their tech in the practice facility of the Golden State Warriors, or they're open to, as you said, putting it in the bowling alley, putting it in a dead space in a independent facility. And they might start shooting leagues for adults, sort of like a pool league or a bowling league or darts league and everything. They're, to Kyle's point, they're not looking for that massive real estate overhead. While they do have franchise locations, it's kind of lean and mean. It's just the tech. It's not trying to be a restaurant. It's not trying to be all things.
If there's a point here, it's that, it doesn't make for a great soundbite, but there's lots of different takes on, as James was describing Shoot 360, there's lots of different takes on this. Is it the real estate angle? Is it a franchise angle? Is it just systems you can lease to others? There's lots of different ways to do this. But you mentioned the Golden State Warriors. I know the Valhalla FC arena, some of the soccer training little modules they're using are used by elite, FC Barcelona, Real Madrid, clubs like that. Fast Break and Huddle are doing this too, right? Fast Break started by doing, their AI tech is creating schedules for the pro leagues. Huddle works, I think Matt on the podcast said, both with Real Madrid and Barcelona for the way they track players. There's only so many elite pro teams that companies can sell to. So they develop this tech at the highest level, sort of proves the concept, and then they're able to bring it down market. By the way, same things that happens with F1, right? To take another racing example, those paddles on your steering wheel came from F1, right? It worked. And then they're like, hey, how do we bring this down market into, I don't know if Hyundai's have it yet, right? But lots of cars have the paddles. So, I think
my Jeep does, and I accidentally press it a lot of times, and I go right to manual. It's never and it's never good, but I like it.
You get the point.
It makes me feel cool. It makes my steering wheel feel cool.
I could use it from first to second, and then I'm like, I'm scared. I don't know how to drive manual.
Kyle, I did want to touch on this because you had a little bonus thing in here. You said sportstainment is derivative of the eatertainment space. Sounds like you're not too happy with the facility eating that you might be participating in when you go out with your two kids and playing sports and stuff.
Yeah, I didn't want to put this one as a prediction because I don't think it's going to happen this year. But one of my favorite ideas for the space, it's so difficult because it's so fragmented. But how do you increase the food? So many families eat multiple meals. I forget the study, 2 to 4 meals are takeout a week, 2 to 4 additional takeout meals a week because of sports, all this stuff. And it's rarely healthy. How do you bring sort of the Aramark of youth sports to not just the bigger facilities? They're okay with food. They have snack stands and service providers and all that. But you show up to the local soccer field, how can you get some portable, healthy food options? So I don't know if that's necessarily a prediction because it's a very challenging problem. But the Valhalla example I just gave, I think for these sort of maybe medium-sized facilities that aren't designed for massive tournaments, but for in a populous region, I think they're going to start thinking a lot more about hospitality, food and beverage, and including alcohol, right? Including beer. This facility out there, you can get a beer, watch your kids' game. Markups on that stuff's pretty good. So, I think that might be a piece of the sportstainment, is like the eatertainment aspect of that. And honestly, the lines are pretty blurred between the attainments there. But
yeah, if we start doing the beers at the sports facilities, we might have an entire newsletter of parents behaving badly.
I kicked that around a while and still like talk to people about it. No one really says they have any issues with it, which kind of blew my mind. I think it's mostly it's so regulated to begin with. I had one operator who was like, "Look, if I want to have like go beyond youth sports and have like events in my facility, I gotta if you're having the company picnic, you gotta have beer, the holiday party." So, but I think I've been surprised. I mean, I think when people hear alcohol youth sports, anyone naturally is like, that sounds like a really really bad idea, but so far it seems like it's working. Safeguards are in place, and as one person told me, look, these parents are drinking anyway, so we might as well try to control it.
Every team's got the parent on the sideline that's got the seltzers in the soft cooler. This isn't that rare. So why not just bring it out into the open? It's like regulated betting. Just put it out in the open, right?
When I was covering high school
police
sports,
it better.
State championship final baseball. It was St. John Vianney and St. Joseph of Montvale. So the winner, SJV won. It's going to be number one in the state. Kids start to celebrate dog pile. Some dad runs on the field with a gigantic thing of champagne and starts dousing them with it. And I looked, and for a second in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, the NJSIA is going to like disqualify them from the state tournament because this dad ran on the field with alcohol, and it's going to be like the biggest story in the history of New Jersey. Thankfully, they either didn't see it or they looked the other way, and all was well.
I love that. Thank God. James, you think Congress will pass at least one piece of youth sports related legislation? Talk more.
Yes. So I think, as Kyle said, all the discussion and debate about affordability, it's very much bipartisan. It's on the national radar. I also think Patriot Games, we keep on hearing about this event in the fall. I continue to effort for more information. Anyone at the White House is listening, please give me a shout. Emails have not been responded to so far. Details have been scarce so far from what the president has said. But I think it's very much on the table. And I look at let me just make sure I get the name right. Mm-hmm. The Home Run for Kids Act, my prediction is that will pass for two reasons. One, of all the bills that are out there, it's a pretty modest one. I think it's like a $200 tax credit for youth sports equipment for families. It's not a $2,000 tax credit or $3,000 or $5,000 like some of the other bills. So I think the fact that it's small works. I also think the sponsor is Mike Lawler. He's a House member from New York State. I think it's the 17th congressional district, Rockland County area. He is probably the most vulnerable House Republican this cycle.
Gotcha. He's
in a district that he's won, but it has been very purple. We're talking like 50-40. I think it was 50-49 Harris in 2024. Dip and tuck. This is if they're going to hold in terms of who has control of the House, it's a big one. So I feel like that might be the perfect storm of, we need to get this guy, throw him a bone, have something he can take to his constituents. It's small. It doesn't really, it makes an impact, but it's not a massive investment, that you have to kind of think twice about with a big time tax credit, and it kind of fits youth sports affordability. So I would predict this on instincts alone, that gets passed before Election Day.
All right. Kyle, you think volleyball and flag football infrastructure will increase?
Yeah, James, you chime in here, but let's talk. We touched on it a little bit today. You talked about the volleyball aspect needing a bit more infrastructure. Flag is way more nascent, right? For the speed at which flag football has grown and the popularity it will take on with, I think Tom Brady and Fanatics involvement and obviously the Olympics and the NFL leaning into it further. The sport doesn't have, like, in some cases, like basic stats, right? And I talked to Jaran Frazier, Flag 50. He built a tech platform for scoring a couple of months ago. He was on the podcast, talked about how like it's so easy for him to get leagues because things designed for traditional football really don't work for flag. I know Game Changers leaning a bit into flag as well, but it just feels like there's so many opportunities for a sport that has outpaced maybe the structure that it has behind it. So I think there's just tons of business opportunities, tech and otherwise, on bringing structure to flag football. Baseball has an ecosystem, basketball has an ecosystem, flag football, total Wild West stuff in a good way.
Yeah, and so I was talking with someone, so I had never even thought of this. You have these massive volleyball tournaments or flag tournaments that, big field complexes, big conference convention halls that have these tournaments. People are like starting to use AI to take a photo of the floor plan or the layouts of the field and then figure out how can we most efficiently get as many fields in as possible? How do we generate a flow so when there's 200 teams on site that everyone is flowing to the next game well, and clubs are all clumped together in one place. So it's just all this infrastructure that isn't there. It's sort of like people who live in Nashville have told me that, like, the population boom in Nashville has completely outgrown the amount of roads they have. Like it's gridlock because they have to build more interstate. They have to build more lanes. I think that is too. The other thing too is we still have a massive disparity. We've written about this in the past of like 2-to-1 girls drop out of sports to boys when they get older. There's a lot of work to be done in the infrastructure to support women's sports, girls' sports, and acknowledging that there are differences to how boys' sports have operated for decades that have to be addressed. A big one is more female coaches. We've seen a lot of initiatives to educate, train, recruit more female coaches.
All right, last one for you, James. You think Versant will partially sell SportsEngine?
Yes. So I think it definitely makes sense for them to sell the management, platform, the management assets. I think for a couple of reasons. One, that's not really a core thing to a cable network company. B, I've actually talked to some club owners, some operators who said, we use SportsEngine because it's kind of the best thing we got, but we're not in love with it. I think a lot of people feel that other platforms are kind of surpassing it. So is Versant going to make that big investment to kind of improve the product, continue to innovate? Probably not. They could, but I just don't see why they would get rid of the streaming aspect. Kind of under the radar, at least for maybe not for people who are deep in the weeds in that industry. They acquired free TV networks, which is just like a bunch of fast networks. There's like a Western network that's like all of the like B and C level like Western sitcoms in the 50s and 60s packaged together. Like the knockoff of Gunsmoke. You could just watch that all day. I could see them taking their streaming product, the sports they have on SportsEngine, and creating sort of a fast channel for youth sports that is similar to Golf Network in that you have live sports, you have sport replays, but you also have educational content. You also have something where, like, this is going to sound crazy, but get the IP to Tom Amansky's videos and just roll that, that sort of thing.
What the hell ever happened to Tom Amansky, right?
I don't know. Back to back to back.
One day you're going to read a headline that like Team Snap for their coaching library paid like $84 million. It's like Disney buying the rights to Hamilton.
Yeah.
Fred McGriff, coming in.
Yes. Fred McGriff has to be, it has to be a package deal with Fred McGriff.
Fred McGriff. But so like, I just, if you got all, and especially when you're all in on League One Volleyball, and League One Volleyball is basically a youth volleyball company that happens to have a pro league on the top, why would you give away that sort of streaming video aspect of it? So my guess is that they sell SportsEngine, the management platform, but they keep the thing that actually fits their business, which is the thing. And the other thing too is, depending on how the Warner Brothers, Netflix, Paramount thing plays out, Versant could be in position to kind of scoop up USA, like TNT Sports on the cheap, and then suddenly they've got all these other sports, and SportsEngine, streaming just plays into that too. So I will predict that they sell the management stuff, keep the video stuff.
So here's my prediction: if they don't sell SportsEngine, because first of all, I think they should. Reason being is there's not really a leader on the SportsEngine team, right? Pete at Team Snap, Brian and Jeremy at League Apps, Samir at Game Changer. Even though they have private equity and or public company owners, those guys get up every day thinking about how to make their platforms better, right? And even they have some constraints given, who owns them. They can't just like disrupt everything because they have a big enough business. I think they will face threats from kind of income or upstarts like a Fast Break who just raised $40 million. They can just come in, AI first software and really try to disrupt those guys. SportsEngine has a much harder time. They don't have like an individual leader there. They're under Versant, which is this sort of weird cable company spinoff amalgam. So I think for SportsEngine to have a fighting chance going forward, I do think a sale makes most sense. If they keep it, though, there does seem to be a pretty good case to keep it, like you said, James, because their CEO was on CNBC, which Versant owns, about a week ago, and he was talking about they don't want to go broad. They want to go deep in specific verticals, and sports and news are those two verticals specifically. And for all the reasons you just mentioned, like they have some meat on the bone for sports, and I think they're going to convince themselves that they need to hang on to SportsEngine because it fits their vertical story. And then in terms of like this youth sports software platform, SportsEngine just begins to atrophy while the Team Snap, League Apps, Game Changers continue to get better and bigger. And then the upstarts really come in and, try to mess with everybody. I just don't see a great outcome here for SportsEngine unless they sell to a strategic buyer or private equity who's able to install leadership and get them sort of punching with the other guys quickly.
Do we know what it's called? Because I called it Versant, James called it Versant, you called it Versant. We have to figure it out.
I thought he said Versant. That's why I said that.
I think it's Versant. If I remember correctly, I think the Matt Hahn was the sports president. I think it was on John Oran's podcast. I think he said Versant. I think I may have slipped to Versant as one of you guys said it, but I'm 99.9% sure it is Versant.
By the way, I get that they had a rebrand. Go ahead.
We should just call it the company that has all of the cable networks except Bravo. I just love the fact that they did this massive deal and they're like, but we got to keep the Housewives. Like Andy Cohen and the Housewives, they stay with us.
The number one rule in branding is you never make something hard to spell or pronounce and make it confusing, right? My two favorite examples of this, we're in Philly here. The best domain in Philly, one of the best local domains in the world had to be philly.com, right? And it was just all the content from the two major newspapers that own the website in Philadelphia. And then a few years ago, they decided, we're going to change that to inquirer.com. Now it redirects. I live here. I worked at the Inquirer. I still have to stop and think about how do I spell Inquirer with an I or an E, right?
Yeah.
Bonehead move. Same deal. Radio.com rebranded as Odyssey, which was maybe like the stupidest thing you've ever seen. So don't rebrand to something with a bunch of vowels that nobody knows how to spell. That's simple. That goes for everyone in youth sports. When youth sports finally begins to separate two different words, right? Which is like my crusade for the next year here. When you begin to separate, don't mix in words that like nobody knows. Don't invent words. Just put a space between two words and call it a day.
I'm thinking Facebook goes to Meta, Google goes to Alphabet. I know those are parent companies and everything, but man, did that bothered me. I still call X Twitter.
What's crazy too is Versant had like the old channel Versus. Like they could have dug that up and called it Versus. I feel like it would be better.
Yeah,
it was like the Outdoor Life Network, and then they had NHL games on. It was like they beat out the Weather Channel for the rights to the NHL after the year-long strike or something.
I can't imagine why the NHL struggled for a while when they were holding their All-Star game on a Tuesday night in February on Versus.
Yeah.
I guarantee you they paid some consulting firm like $4 million to come up with Versant.
That's what HBO Max did to go HBO Max, back now to HBO Max. It's crazy. I mean, shout out to those guys, man. Hey, there's worse degrees to get after a 4 or 5 year college.
Don't mess with a good thing.
Yeah, we got the last one for you. Kyle, take this one. Sports credit card and sports wallet. What was your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, they're not exactly the same, but I'm going to read to you something I wrote maybe sometime in the fall. We had our sort of trends and big ideas. And I said the youth sports loyalty or credit card. And I wrote a substantial portion of youth sports addressable market is in travel. Credit cards already do a pretty good job in this category, but the best are high fee solutions like Amex Platinum or Chase Sapphire, which includes perks that specifically cater to business travelers. And then I went on and said my solution, Dick's in particular, offers a score rewards. Dick's offers a score rewards card that gives bonus points on Dick's. But what if it went further? Introducing the Dick's Sporting Goods Chase Home Plate Reserve Trademark Register Trademark. For $299 annual fee per year, you get 5x points on all Dick's purchases, 4x on airfare, hotel, and rental car purchases up $20,000 a year, 3x on sports registration costs and other apparel equipment purchased elsewhere from Dick's, 2x on gas and restaurants, and 1 point on everything else, right? So I heard that a few months ago. Just yesterday or this week, Fanatics announces its sports credit card, and Michael Rubin, certified big dog, woof woof, says, I think it's going to be a game changer. There's never been a credit card that a sports fan actually cares about. So Fanatics is out there doing this in sports commerce, and they want it to be everything that's in their ecosystem. I think Dick's is the perfect company to steal this idea and apply it specifically to youth and amateur sports, and reward people for all the things they spend within that ecosystem. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but I continue to think it's a great idea, and it's only a matter of time until somebody who's big enough figures out a way to give people a meaningful way to get rewarded for all the money we talk about everyone spending. The other side of that is I put athlete wallet. It's not exactly the same thing, but it felt like it fit under the right umbrella. Data is all over the place, right? Huddle is collecting data here. Our sponsor today, much smaller, obviously, MPI Sports, about the scouting combine for youth sports. I think the volleyball thing you wrote about today, James, is there's a data element to it, right? Sideline HD with Diamondcast, right? Everyone is collecting highlights, data, stats. If you're an athlete and you play multiple sports, the way we talked about lots of athletes should, especially at the younger age, there is no single app where you can log in and see your career, so to speak, right? What leagues did you play in? How many games? What were your stats? It's everywhere. And there's lots of people trying to figure out ways to bundle this together in the athlete wallet. And everybody has a take on this, but none of these wallets, none of these histories want to seem to talk to each other, right? Nobody, I imagine, I don't want to speak for any particular company, but I imagine Huddle doesn't want to give its data to Game Changer or vice versa and allow them to import it into TeamSnap unless there's a specific partnership agreement that has been signed, right? So I think there needs to be something that plays well with all of this, whether that's portable data, APIs, a third-party app like a Copilot where you can tie in multiple bank accounts into one view. Someone is going to crack this and allow all of these, fragmented data points, athlete profiles to talk to each other. So that's the athlete wallet, not exactly the credit card, but same sort of idea.
You want to trademark that?
What's that? What's the trademark? Wallet? The athlete wallet? It's got to be taken. But I felt like Dick's might have a problem with me trademarking the Dick's Chase home plate reserve. I'll ask him at the event. Hey, could I get the trademark on this?
It's just as good as the SportsEngine Salometer by our guy, James Kratch.
I tried to make one on Canva for the newsletter. I gave up 5 minutes in. I was like, this is a little bit above my...
Just take a picture of Kyle's.
Yeah, here you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Where are you on the Salometer, James?
I guess I'm in the middle because I think they're going to sell half of it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Kyle, you
That's
still
good math?
Good math out of you. You still at the green where the yellow meets the green?
Yeah, I'll keep it yellow meets the green. I just think that I think it has to get sold. I don't think it makes any sense.
All right.
It's such a competitive world. They own a good asset in a competitive world, but like we all know, these big legacy media companies, even the spinoffs, they could barely run the media side of their business. They're not going to be able to run youth sports software. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
NBC got as far as it did because I don't think there was as much competition, right? They had the reach 15 years ago when no one else was really thinking about it.
I do think there's a lot to be said to these big media companies focusing on what they're good at, and if they have something that they really can't optimize to kind of offload it. I always think about Disney and National Geographic. A couple of years ago, I think National Geographic had 4 million print subscribers, and Disney couldn't figure out how to make money off of National Geographic. One of the most iconic things that you go to any house in America, they probably got National Geographic somewhere. 4 million print subscribers in 2023, and they couldn't figure out how to make it work. That's the thing you sort of offload to someone who can.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our 2026 predictions. When's this newsletter being published?
Hopefully soon. This one's on me. It's all written. We just got to format it and find a day to get it out. Yeah. If you made it this far, you probably don't need to read it.
It's got some more in-depth stuff, I would say. Go to buyingsandlot.com. When we do publish it, it'll go right to your inbox if you are a subscriber. But check it out. It's got a little bit more in-depth than we went in here, but we did do a good job. This is the longest I've recorded since I got here. So this was a good time.
This is a big show. I'll give the plug here. If you made it this far and you're an hour in, you definitely need to come to our event, Buying Sandlot Summit in Philly, April 14th and 15th at Switch House and Ballers. Go to buyingsandlot.com. The banner's right there at the top. Early bird ticket prices will be available through the end of January. They're currently $599. They will be increasing. They'll end up by event time $200-$300 more. So if you want them, get in early. Prices are good. We're selling those almost at cost because we want to have a good turnout here. The hospitality and the venue, as we've talked about on here, will set the bar for the youth sports industry. I'm confident of that. And hopefully our speaker list, just of what's been announced so far. Adding Matt, the COO of Huddle today, announcing him. I mean, there's chatter they may go public. They're how many figures are in a billion, right? They're a 10-figure company valuation. You got the COO talking. We got executives from Game Changer, Team Snap, and lots more on the way. So stay tuned. Get your early bird tickets. And yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah. Come meet the guys. Me, James, Kyle.
That's it. Well, so Kyle, why don't you talk about what you'll be doing there, right? This is not just a...
Yeah. I'm going to be parking myself in one spot the entire conference, and we're just going to be pulling people in and out. The CEO of Team Snap comes by. Hey, get on here for a couple of minutes. The COO of Huddle comes by. Hey, get on here for a minute. So if you want an extra layer of being able to talk about your company and what you guys have coming up in the future and stuff for a light, short conversation, 10, maybe even 15 minutes, I'll be there live streaming the entire conference, and we'll chat, and it'll go out to our subscribers and on both podcasts and
yeah, everything you'll be doing there will be cutting up and distributing across social. So if you're there, right, and we don't know about you and you're a small company in the space, show up, talk to us for 5 minutes. You get on our social feeds. That's our thank you for coming to the event.
100%. All right. Well, we will see you Friday. James, thanks for coming on. Thanks for wearing your best
Anytime,
Patagonia
guys.
head.
Yeah.
Strong Patagonia. What model year is that? Do you have a model year on that?
No, I have to.
What vintage is that?
Has that thing got a Hemi?
No, it's just a classic navy one. I actually have this in purple too. It's very good looking. Just
bold.
Next time you come on, I want the purple one. All right.
You got
That's
it.
off brand. This is a steward of brand. The purple is off brand.
That's true.
It's off brand. We have 3 approved brand colors. We have blue, green, and orange is our event color. That's it.
Yes.
Okay.
Black and gray are neutrals. They're neutrals.
After the event, is orange allowed? Because I do like it's a good power orange.
It's an event orange. If you see that orange, like you think event. I'm trying to condition people for that.
All right.
You could wear the heck out of it at the event, though.
It's true.
You could go like Dumb and Dumber orange jumpsuit style, or orange suit style.
100%. 100%. All right. We will talk to you on Friday.